Okay, thank you all so much for joining us today. This is the 2020 Virtual Connectivity Summit, and is put on by the program that I run at the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, which is the Southern Vermont Economy Project. This is the agenda, so I'll just give a quick introduction, then we'll hear from Commissioner Tierney, Rob Fish, from some legislators. Hopefully we'll have a federal delegation representative on, and then we will hear from Windham Regional to talk about the updates on the Windham Broadband Project, and then hear from our CUDs here in the region. So for those of you who are not aware, the Southern Vermont Economy Project puts on webinars, conferences, mini summits, and provides technical assistance and training to help advance local economic and community development projects in Southern Vermont. We have a couple more trainings coming up here soon in June, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on before the end. And I just, wanted to touch on the fact that this is actually our fourth connectivity summit, which is pretty awesome. The first one was in 2017. We held it at the Dover Town Hall. That's that black and white photo that you see with Clay Purvis speaking there. And then the one in 2018, we held at Mount Snow, and there were actually, I think, a little over 40 participants there. And then in 2019, we had the connectivity breakfast, which was before the summit, the Southern Vermont Economy Summit. And then that's what this was supposed to be. Actually, tomorrow is the day that we were supposed to hold the summit on, and we were going to hold the connectivity breakfast before that. So, yeah, I think it's really great sort of looking back at sort of, where we were with broadband and connectivity in 2017, and really how far we've come since then. Okay, I am going to turn it over to Commissioner Tierney.
Well, thank you so much for having me and having Rob. I think many of you know Rob pretty well now, and that's an outgrowth of the excellent work that was done last year in passing the broadband bill. So he's been a wonderful addition to our team at the department, and it's a real pleasure for me to be here as a first for this summit as well. Clay sends his regards. Many of you are aware that we are working on the Emergency Broadband Action Plan. We closed our public comment deadline yesterday, and now the heavy lift is underway to review all the comments and modify the plan as appropriate. That is what is keeping Clay from you today, but I'll be a poor substitute instead. Speaking of the plan, what I'd like to do with you folks is give you a brief overview of a couple of issues, and that's one of them. And then I'm going to pass the torch on to Rob, who will speak to you about his work with the CUDs and the Wi-Fi hotspots that we've been standing up in the COVID-19 emergency, and other steps that we've taken as well. So turning to my part of the program, I'll speak to you about a little bit about the state of connectivity in Vermont, the Emergency Broadband Action Plan, the state of our litigation before the Federal Communications Commission, and then finally a few words about mapping and data collection that we're doing. The state of connectivity in Vermont very much varies with where you're standing in Vermont, as you folks well know. I think you're particularly committed to this issue because for you, there are a lot of hardships involved with connectivity in our state. That said, I think as Vermonters, it's important for us to occasionally take a collective view of matters as well. And so some things I'd like to point out are that from a state perspective, at least during the COVID-19 emergency, a lot of our infrastructure has proved to work quite well. We've not had the internet go down for long periods of time. We've not had massive outages for telephony. I think this has been a revelation for the industry itself at times. Nobody knew what would happen when Vermonters were ordered home to stay home, and we learned that For those who have it, the connectivity is resilient. For the too many who don't have it, it has simply highlighted what we already knew, which was this is an intolerable and unacceptable situation. To that end, I think I want to be clear about why the department issued the Emergency Broadband Action Plan. It was very much with the awareness and concern for those folks who are distributed at the 70,000 addresses throughout the state that continue to have no access or very little access to internet connectivity. That does not make a lot of people feel good when they hear that, because it means that we're not looking to address every problem that attends Vermont's connectivity landscape. And I would simply point out that the process of developing the EBAP Emergency Broadband Action Plan has been a revelation in that it has brought everybody or most stakeholders out from their respective corners and to the table, and has provided a very instructive overview of, first, the inordinate energy and commitment that Vermonters have to cracking this nut. Secondly, the amazing capability and intellectual and technical competency that is deeply and widely spread in our state. It doesn't just belong to industry. It has also revealed that we have a lot of tribes. We have people who are very, very committed to their viewpoints. It is no joke to say that people identify with fiber to the premises the way other people identify with wearing blue jerseys in a rugby match. And people identify with wireless technology the way others identify with wearing green jerseys in a rugby match. Now picture a rugby match with many more teams than just two, everybody committed to their jersey. And the art is to get everybody to stay in the game and to make some progress that is deeply meaningful to our state as a whole. For me, that begins with recognizing that connectivity is, it's not about whether I have it and you don't have it. If I have it and you don't have it, in many ways, I don't have it. It's something that has to circulate, that it has to be comprehensive, that it necessarily needs to be multilateral and bilateral if it's going to be truly functional. And increasingly, I'm very much concerned about keeping an eye on the need to recognize the convergence of our connectivity needs with our energy needs, our grid transformation in the state, and the way that tomorrow's grid and our ability to use it all as Vermonters is very much dependent on everybody having robust connectivity. Coming from the Army as I do from many, many, many years ago in my life, I remember well the basic battle tactic, which was that your unit's only as strong as its weakest member. And so when I apply that to the realm of connectivity, we're only as strong, our connectivity is only as strong as the person who has the least amount of it. And when we still have people who have none, that means we're not very strong. And that is why the EBAP is focused on creating an opportunity for access for those 70,000 addresses in Vermont that have less than 25.3. A common misperception about the plan is that we are advocating for 25.3 to people. And that is not the case. What we are arguing is that 25.3 is the standard by which we prioritize who gets help through this plan and who doesn't. What we've advocated for in the plan so far is that the ideal provisioning under the plan is 100 up, 100 down speed, fiber to the premises as a solution. But I do think there needs to be recognition that there are situations where a fiber solution is either not cost effective or will not be timely. And that's where the red jerseys and the yellow jerseys and orange jerseys and green jerseys and blue jerseys come into play again. Because as long as people are so vigorously committed to the color of jersey that they wear, I think we're going to have difficulty making that collective step forward in trying to get threshold and basic connectivity to Vermonters. I have said more about the plan right now than I meant to, because I'm mindful that I have 15 minutes and I am sharing the time with my teammate, Rob Fish. So I'm going to move on to other topics. The state of SEC litigation. Couple of things. It's been a long time since the state of Vermont has been active in front of the Federal Communications Commission. Very important things are happening there right now. As many of you know, they have a rural digital opportunity fund program that they've stood up, and there will be an auction in October to auction off significant amounts of money in order to fund projects that will address last mile build out in rural parts of America. Vermont needs to have competent and feasible participation in that auction. And the department very much has been intent on supporting new entrants such as CUDs or our electric utilities or some combination thereof to participate in that auction in order to help close gaps in our connectivity infrastructure in Vermont. We don't control that program, and so my theory has been, let's make sure that the FCC commissioners hear from us directly how their programs have helped or not helped us in the past, and the need to be a little more open-minded in the design of these programs. I wish I could sit here today and tell you that I have concrete successes to point to in that advocacy, but I don't. What I can say is that those visits have been made in person by me to every one of those commissioners. We have been filing comments in the relevant dockets. We are making Vermont's voice heard. And as often happens in public policy in the United States, positions have to be rejected many times before they finally get accepted. And that begins with speaking up, which is what we're doing for Vermont right now. I am pursuing a waiver theory with the FCC where I'm saying, look, if you insist on going forward with the programs that you have, will you at least consider the occasional waiver now and then for the situation like Vermont is in, where past federal funding has proved to be preclusive in many ways for us to gain the funding that we need now to complete last mile build out. Again, I can't point to anything specific. I wish I could. But I am optimistic that these efforts will not be in vain and that they are the beginning of a conversation that is long overdue. In point of fact, when we registered our opposition, or better said, our motion for reconsideration on the RDOF program, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund program, there were several states in the country that weighed in support of Vermont's position. We were the first state to register our grounds for reconsideration with the commission. And I was a little surprised and very pleased to see that other states took up the flag as well and have joined us in that conversation. Finally, a word about mapping and data collection. We have this exercise underway right now. I made an appeal to Vermonters to let us know if they have students at home right now who don't have connectivity during the pandemic, so that they can do their schoolwork at home. I've also been intent on finding folks who are in need of telemedicine and telehealth to see if we can find clusters or hotspots in the state where we can then in turn to our utilities, whether electric utilities or telecommunications utilities, and say, are there solutions that you can deploy between now and the end of the year to get some number of Vermonters at least the connectivity that they don't have right now? The reason for that time frame, as many of you know, is because of the constraints that have been imposed on the COVID-19 grant that we received, the $1.25 billion. I have to say, I've never in my career seen federal aid more, how shall I put it, structured in a way that is almost directed at being unhelpful, notwithstanding that it has been dispersed to the states to be helpful. So it's there's the sketchiest of authority under the regulations pertaining to that grant for broadband infrastructure to be built out. I am very intent on pushing those arguments as best as we can, but the bite for Vermont is that unlike in past rounds of funding and other disasters, if we spend the money in a way that subsequent review by the federal government reveals to have been inconsistent with the regulations, they will claw it back. And that means that Vermont is then on the hook for the dollars that were, in the federal government's eyes, misspent. That's a serious, serious concern for us right now because, as I'm sure Representative Sibilia will speak to a little bit or has in other circles, the state has many, many fiscal challenges arising from this pandemic. And so the ability to absorb a payback obligation because somebody has found fault with how we've chosen to spend those dollars is a serious challenge. I am guilty, Sarah, because it's now, there are 3 minutes left in our program and I haven't shared the time as I ought to with Rob. So I'm hoping you'll indulge him a little bit and let him have more time than we were supposed to get. The bottom line is we're closing in on scrubbing the data that we've received on the mapping exercise and are hopeful to be able to go to the utilities in short order and see what they can do to help Vermonters in the pandemic. With that, Rob, take it away.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll only take a few minutes here, and I'm going to share my screen if that's okay, Sarah.
Yep, let me just make it so you're able to. Go ahead.
Okay, let me. Okay, can everybody see my screen right now?
Yep.
Okay, I can't see my screen, but we'll go from there. Thank you, Sarah, for putting this together for, I guess you said it was the third year, and it's nice to see so many familiar faces. Last fall, I felt like I was preparing to move down to the Deerfield Valley and Bennington County, and that's just testament to how much is happening down there right now. It's exciting, and it inspires me every day of what you've accomplished so far, in spite of being in the middle of a pandemic. Go figure. So once again, my name is Rob Fish. I am the dedicated staff at the Public Service Department that's working with communities around the state to expand broadband. That involves connecting communities with additional resources, with each other, education, outreach, and just trying to move the process along and provide support where it's necessary. So as the commissioner mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic was quite the curveball, but it really exasperated existing problems. It made it very clear that broadband connectivity is, frankly, an essential service for communities in the modern age. It's become essential for providing telehealth, telemedicine, distance learning. Our education system has moved online. Remote work. How many of you are working remotely right now? You see, I'm in my basement right now. If I lived in many parts of rural Vermont, this would not even be possible to participate in discussions such as this. It's essential to just the health of our democracy and our ability to participate in the affairs of our local communities and our state. It's also important to look at this in hindsight of disaster resiliency, of what could have been done different if these capabilities existed 6 months ago, and to realize how important it is that we ensure that they are here moving forward. So I want to talk briefly about a few of the things that we're doing with at the department to address the COVID-19 pandemic. The commissioner has kindly talked in length about the emergency broadband plan and her call to action. I want to discuss what we're doing to address the homework gap and our Wi-Fi hotspot project first. So you'll see on the screen right now a map that shows underserved locations by supervisory union. You'll see we're smack in the middle of an area that is underserved at the moment. So we are taking this data and we've solicited help from the Agency of Education, the Principals Association, the Superintendents Association, to try to get a handle on students that are lacking access in each of these supervisory unions. The challenge is that it's not just a matter of not having broadband available. That's all that's showed on this map right now, is where our data shows that there's no connection over 4.1 available. In many cases, it has to do with affordability, where a student and a family cannot even take advantage of some of the programs that various telecom companies have provided that was going to give them free access because they have outstanding bills or there's other barriers. So we are soliciting information from schools around the state. This information can be entered via an interactive map or sent to us via a spreadsheet to try to identify who doesn't have access and why. So I want to just put it out there. Please share this call to action with your school districts to make sure that we get data to make good decisions. The second thing I want to talk about is Wi-Fi hotspots. Wi-Fi hotspots are an imperfect solution to an immediate need. This isn't a long-term solution to solving the connectivity issues of communities, but it was a way, and it continues to be a way, to very quickly deploy access in areas that are underserved. Uh, we started by doing a survey along with help from Agency of Education, Vermont League of Towns and Cities and Towns, your regional planning commissions, and the support of all the communication districts. And I shouldn't forget the libraries, to identify Wi-Fi hotspots around the state that are open to the public or have guest access and are accessible via a parking lot or the street or somewhere where someone could access these services while staying distant. What you need to do during the pandemic. We took that data and then identified areas of the state without access, without open Wi-Fi hotspots. And we were gracious to accept a donation from Microsoft and RTO of an additional 35 hotspots that we've deployed around the state. And we realized with the success and the demand of that, we've gone ahead and we're deploying an additional 50 hotspots. Down in Windham County, hotspots have been deployed in Athens. New ones are going to be deployed in Newfane, Windham, and Marlborough, Saxon Village. There's quite a few that are being deployed in that area, and then across, I see there's some Bennington County folks, across Bennington County. We're still open to additional locations, especially in Halifax, Reedsboro, Stamford. These are all towns with an acute need, but the locations that we had selected had fallen through for one reason or another. So if you have a location that you have in mind, whether it's your town office, whether it's the general store or a church, please be in contact. There are still a few more units that can be deployed, and I'd very much like to get more down in your area. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk briefly about communication union districts. You all know communication union districts. You're all a part of one. And I want to show a map of where we are right now. You'll see the first map here is just the current CUDs of where we are as of May. I think it's actually May 14th, because you all down in the Deerfield Valley keep adding new towns that I can't keep up. But if you looked at this map a year ago, you would only see the purple and green. That is all you would see. We've accomplished a lot in this last year, and that's all due to the hard work on the ground by residents of towns across the state. Where it's going, if you look at the other map, there are currently study areas or proposals to create new communication districts in Lamoille County, Addison County, Rutland County, and then there's smaller projects underway way up in Alburgh and the Lake Champlain Islands. Like, a lot is happening, and that is what is going to allow us to expand broadband across the state. The last slide I want to show is just a little bit of inspiration. You've probably seen this slide from me before. I just want to show you on the right here, you have a map of showing where there's currently 100 by 100 internet connections available. You'll notice that where it's available matches right up with that area that's in purple. That is EC fiber. I just want to leave to just say that it can be done, it has been done, it will be done, and I'm depending on all you to help make that happen. I'm here to be as much support as I can. The department's busy writing grants, developing materials, updating our website, providing data, issuing broadband innovation grants. We were happy to give one to the folks in Bennington County a few weeks ago, and the Windham County has benefited greatly already from this. There's a lot more to do, and we can do it together. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Rob and Commissioner Tierney. I did want to open it up for any questions for Rob or the Commissioner at this point before we move on to our next speaker. Thank you. Brana, did you have a question? Can you go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yes. Hi. I live in Vernon, and we're one of those locations that allegedly has really good coverage from Comcast and Consolidated. However, during this time, people have wondered when we're going to get better broadband service. And I know one of the problems that we have right now is, and this is the question, what do I do? How do I get the select board on board, to vote to approve this? And I don't know, Rob or Commissioner Tierney or Laura, even if who I ask, and I need advice offline. But and Munson and Cameron and I. So I need some help with that, and it's not for right now, but some other time.
So, Brana, I would suggest that you say hello to Rob.
He's right under me on my screen.
It's like the Brady Bunch family.
Yeah.
And Rob, I saw him smile already. And you just, Rob, if you can get Brana's contact information, maybe Sarah can help you with that. We'll get with you and we'll get you your questions answered, okay?
Thank you.
You bet.
Brana, I also want to point to David Jones and Ann Van Waring that are right above me on my screen here. They have been going all around Windham County and making great, incredible presentations and signing up additional towns. I'm going to volunteer one or both of them right now to come to a select board meeting in Vernon. So you can hear it from your neighbors about why you want a seat at the table.
We would be happy to come.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes,
Wonderful.
Rob, if you would get me their contact information.
Sure.
Steve John, our vice president, is our recruiting chair, so I'll make sure that he gets back in touch with Brana.
He's probably out there speaking to a town right now.
Possibly.
Great, wonderful. David,
we
did you have
welcome
any? Dave, do you have anything else to add to that?
Oh, no, that covered it. We're out recruiting, so we'll be happy to speak with their select board.
Wonderful. And I have everyone's contact info, so I can do the sharing. Awesome. That was easy. Tim Scoggins.
Hey, yes, I was just wondering if we have any information about to what extent affordability is an issue for people, especially kids right now, in terms of accessing the internet.
Tim, we have some indication of that from the survey that we've been doing to find kids. So it's not always a question of access, as in there's no line in the neighborhood or there's no circuit in the neighborhood. In some instances, anecdotally, we're finding that, yes, there are lines that pass the house, but because it's not affordable, the family's not taking the service. And that is an area where, at least in the very, very short term, the COVID-19 relief money does make more clear provision for helping people in those circumstances. Not so much through the department. We actually have not received any direct money through that program or that grant, but rather there are existing programs in the school districts, for instance, that have gotten or are supposed to be getting money under COVID-19 to be able to address this kind of issue. But it's definitely a concern, especially for the governor. And stay tuned on that is what I would say.
Thank you.
David?
Yes, Commissioner, we would be really happy if there were students who were located adjacent to existing services that were not getting them but could get them if they had the means to do so.
So by that, David, I think you mean students that are where there's a line passing them, but they don't have a service drop right now.
Yes, that's right. Affordability is definitely going to be an issue in our district, and there very well could be some students in that boat.
Yep, this is a very good example of what I was talking about with the green. It's an analogy to the green jerseys and the red jerseys and the orange jerseys. In this case, it's not a question of perspective as much as it's about a question of issue and priority. What I'm finding is that there are stacks of needs. There's a need for the connection, the physical infrastructure connection to be made. Then there's a need for some sort of mitigation of the cost of getting a subscription. And then there are often needs for greater what's the word I want again, bandwidth, because you have several members of the household who all have need to be using the internet connection. And so the thing that often happens is people focus on one or the other, and then they get dispirited because by the time you add up everything in the stack, it's an overwhelming burden and doesn't seem solvable. So what I'm trying to do right now is take it segment by segment. And what I can say to the specific issue you're raising is getting those low-lying fruit connections is very much a priority under the Emergency Broadband Access Plan. And then, as I said, on buying down the subscriptions, stay tuned on that.
Yes, the related point I wanted to make is when I went to the interactive broadband map and checked out my own location, it was marked as having 4.1 service. And you can see that I have better than 4.1 service. It may well be that some students have better service than is shown in the department's database.
Yep.
And so that's something that you might want to check.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's
There
literally
may not
why...
be a need to extend new service to them. They may already have it.
No, absolutely. And one of the things that Clay and his staff are busy with, and Rob's getting a pass because he's playing hooky coming here, is they're scrubbing the data to find things like that. So appreciate the pointer very much. I find that what I have to do is get comfortable with not having a perfect answer for everything, but having a solid enough basis to move forward on things. So we're doing that.
Great. Thank you so much. We are going to move on. Commissioner Tierney is going to stick on as much as possible, but I just want to make sure to get her questions in case she needed to jump off, but she'll be listening for as long as...
And also, Sarah, folks are always welcome to contact us outside of the summit.
Wonderful.
I mean, we serve you, and that's our pleasure.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Representative Sibilia. I had Senator Balint on the agenda, but I think they're on the floor right now. She might join us later, and Laura has to go onto the floor at 2. So, Laura, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to, unfortunately, I have a hard stop at probably like 3 minutes of 2 because the House is going back on the floor. I don't know who that is there that's coming on. Okay, so we have been in there's a couple of things that I want to highlight. We have right now in front of us a situation. Last year, we passed a bill, worked with the administration, passed a bill, and basically that bill said, no one's coming to save you. The national providers have not been able to find a way to make money where you live. And so they're not providing you coverage. We cannot make them provide you coverage because they're federally preempted. And we don't have the money to provide coverage for you. And as many of you are aware, we put out the legislation, Act 79, not that created CUDs. That legislation happened in 2016, but that really incentivized the CUD model. And we have had just a tremendous response, which I'm sure Rob can attest to in terms of how busy he is, from regular Vermonters stepping forward and saying, I'll do it. I will do it. I will try and figure it out. I will work with my neighbors. I often find that when we have the biggest challenges plunked into our lap, there's always an opportunity that comes with that challenge. And with COVID, that has been a tremendous amount of funding that has come into the state. And I think the commissioner spoke about some of the perils that folks are trying to avoid in spending those funds in line with how they were designated by the federal government. And there's a tremendous amount of thinking going on in that regard. So we now have a lot of money on the table, potentially some of which can be spent for broadband. That is a much different scenario than what we did last year. And now all of a sudden we have a lot of folks who are interested in accessing those funds, including some of the providers who were unwilling, unable, they might say, to cover Southern Vermont, our rural areas in Southern Vermont and rural Vermont. And so that dynamic is there. One of the things that has been a real imperative for me, and I know my committees, and and I believe the department, for me, we cannot move forward in any way that undercuts our CUDs. We have to move forward in a way that supports and strengthens those folks that step forward and said, I will do it. The CUDs, for me, represent the democratization of our telecommunications infrastructure in the state of Vermont. For me, in a position that I take with me and speak pretty clearly to, our communities can never, ever be put in this position again. As many of you know, I see this as an issue of public safety. In fact, it has been an issue of public safety in some of my communities. As we see, consolidated, the traditional telephone company going away, or trying to go away, chronic problems with repairs. It is a public safety issue. So we've got to get that fixed. And we said, we're going to count on you, Vermonters. We're going to strengthen you, Vermonters. We're going to support you, Vermonters, to get that done. Some of the strings that are attached to these funds are timelines. And despite the fact that we have had a tremendous outpouring of volunteers that have come forward in the CUD model, many of our CUDs are still babies. And thinking about, they're not quite ready to build fiber or any other infrastructure that was being contemplated. The timelines that we're looking at right now are December 30th for the CARES money. And folks are feeling pretty frantic about that. This is potentially a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. For me, when we think about a project, when we think about getting something done, probably the worst way to accomplish that is by thinking, how can I spend these funds? As opposed to, what is the project? What is the project that needs to get done? How much time do I have to do it in? And okay, now how can I apply these funds? And it's a pretty small shift, but that is something that I'm thinking about. Basically, what I'm telling you is what I'm percolating on in the legislature. The administration, the legislature are going to end up doing something here at this point. In addition to those things, when we think about the democratization, when we think about our local Vermonters stepping forward to correct this situation, hopefully forevermore. And now we have a bunch of funds on the table. It's become very, very clear that we have a challenge in terms of coordination and implementation. We don't have a formal coordinating, implementing entity in the state around telecommunications. The department is a regulator. They regulate the existing utilities that we have. They're also a resource. They're a resource for the utilities. They're a resource for the CUDs. We've pushed. What are you? Thumbs up? Yeah. Okay. The commissioner loves what I'm saying. Yeah.
I do. Nothing would please me more than to be able to say we can also implement, but you are speaking the truth.
I know.
Civilian.
Yeah.
And I'm so pleased that that's being recognized.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. So that is really difficult. And in fact, the commissioner and I have had several conversations along these lines recently, because we do need, and we're hearing loud and clear from other folks who can help make things happen here, that we need some coordination. So that is something that is top of mind for me for the short term, at least. How can we coordinate and implement in the next couple of years in a way that, again, going back to our principle, doesn't undercut the CUDs. And then, I would just go back to the whole equity piece. I was happy to hear the commissioner talking about that, thinking about energy equity, thinking about telecommunications equity. I mean, that is a third principle that I think we have to hold. And so when we have a situation like we have right now, there's a sense of urgency. What we've seen with the COVID pandemic is places where people were having a hard time connecting before, where students, were struggling before, where, there was poverty before, that has been exacerbated by this situation, extremely exacerbated in many cases. And that creates a real sense of urgency for public officials to try and immediately address those things. When we think about immediately addressing, so that if we have a recurrence in the fall or in the winter of this, and kids cannot go to schools, when we think about that, and we think about what can we do immediately, it's not fiber. We cannot roll out fiber immediately before December 30th in large enough amounts, I don't believe, that will get to students. And so, the commissioner's talking about red, all the different colored jerseys. That's part of where this conversation comes in. We've had a large scale wholesale wireless project in the state of Vermont that failed. And it failed because of line of sight and because of the topography in Vermont. And we also just had a company that wasn't able to manage that process on their own. We don't have another statewide wireless provider. And so that is a challenge when we think about equity, when we think about not undercutting the CUDs, when we think about acting quickly and with a sense of urgency, that's a challenge. So I don't know that I've given you any answers. If I was going to encourage you to do anything, those of you that are on the phone right now, I want to say the work that has been going on in both the Southern Vermont CUD and the Deerfield Valley CUD, it's incredible what folks have been doing. Sue, I see Sue shaking her head. I mean, it really is that folks have moved forward with this. The strength of the CUDs is in the grassroots nature and the strength that is developed in doing something at the grassroots level. Doing things at the grassroots level, particularly, trying to figure out telecommunications for a massive rural area at the grassroots level is extremely difficult. And so for those of you that are on the call that are in Southern Vermont, if your towns have not joined, if your town has joined and you are not participating, I want to let you know that the CUDs could use your energy, they could use your time, and they could use your talent, and they are necessary. And so I think with that, I will stop. Somebody will tell me there's something else maybe I should say, or maybe everybody will be happy I've stopped.
Thanks, Laura. If anyone does have any questions, please just go ahead and put them in the chat function there. And I know Laura has to jump off pretty soon, so I can sort of filter them in as we move along. Next, we have Sue Westa, who is with Windham Regional Commission, and she is going to provide us with an update on the Windham Broadband Project. So let me make sure you're unmuted. Hold on, Sue. Why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself?
I got it.
Thanks.
I think I'm good now.
Great.
Okay, hi everyone, and thanks for having me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our project, how it got started, the overall, give you an overview of what we've been doing over the past few months and where we're going to go from here. The Broadband Innovation Grant was already referenced by multiple other speakers today. And of course, we want to thank the legislature and Laura for the opportunity to participate in this grant program. We received our grant in December. And the Windham Regional team consists not only of our commission, but also of ValleyNet and Rural Innovation Strategies. Those folks had already submitted a letter of interest to the state and asked us to join them on the application team. It was really important for us to have technical experts like these folks. Both of those organizations had already been working together to address rural broadband issues in Vermont and in other parts of the country. And ValleyNet, in case anyone is not familiar with them, operates EC Fiber, who was already called out as a model for implementing broadband in Vermont. And that's the model that we are looking to implement here in the Windham region as well. Our role at the Commission is primarily to serve as community engagers, and the overall program goal is to provide internet service to the unserved and underserved areas of our region. Our project consists primarily of two components, the development of a feasibility study and a business plan. And so we rolled out the project in January. We had a project meeting that was very well attended. Over 75 folks came to that meeting, and we introduced the project, and we asked communities to have their select boards, if they were interested and wanted to participate in the project, to pass a resolution confirming that. And we also had them designate an official town appointee. Only 4 of our towns at this point have elected not to participate so far. But some of them, and that's been for various reasons, including that they already have significant fiber in place. In February, we then held a survey training workshop that was also very well attended. Survey is a significant component of our feasibility study, and we worked with the towns to help them spread the word about the survey. We developed a web page, developed project information for them, fact sheets, a frequently asked questions page, and flyers. And the towns, I have to say, as Laura referred to, did really an amazing job. We received over 4,200 responses to that survey, which we felt was a really excellent response rate. We helped the communities were the ones really who got the word out about the survey. They some of them mailed information directly to their residents. Some posted flyers around town, information on their websites, and paper copies were available as those were needed for folks who did not have access to the internet. This also coincided with town meeting time, which many communities use to their advantage. They sent up tables at town meeting where they passed out flyers and surveys, and some of them even helped folks actually complete the surveys right there on the spot. I know at least one town had borrowed iPads from their local library that they used to help folks complete the surveys right there at the town meeting. So all of that survey information was summarized into a report that's now available on our website, and that information was also used to inform our feasibility study. Overall, the survey results show that there is a need and interest in broadband and improved internet service throughout our region. Although much of our region does have some form of internet service, whether it be cable, cell service, or DSL, much of that service is substandard and people are not satisfied with the quality of their service. One of the really interesting questions that we included in our survey was about what do you use the internet for? And some of the responses are typical, what you would expect. 96% said they use the internet for email, 89% for entertainment, 77% for social networking. But also 62% said they use the internet for working at home, and this was pre-COVID. So I think that is pretty telling. Also, 47% used it for education and 40% used it for healthcare. And I think if we were to redistribute that survey now, we'd get even much higher response rates there. The survey was completed by March 17th, so that was just as this pandemic was really gaining some momentum and attention. But it has also, as was referred to earlier, really strengthened the awareness of this issue and the need. Remote working has really become the new norm now and is widely accepted. And if there is a silver lining in all this, it will be that there may be more funding available as a result, because this has really just confirmed the importance of our work here. Next, I want to talk a little bit about our feasibility study that incorporated the survey information and other data that was available through the state and elsewhere. And that survey, or that study, is also currently available on our website at the Windham Regional Commission. The most important thing to know is that the feasibility study recommended one communications union district for the entire region. The study finds that a communications union district in the Windham region will be able to aggregate enough demand to make operating a regional fiber network viable. And this they see this as the region's best path forward. Most importantly, they also note that the community support has been overwhelming, and the work that the communities have done to contribute to the feasibility study is not, really just symbolic. As the project moves forward, everything from future pre-subscription campaigns to fundraising will be much easier with as much community engagement and involvement as possible. So this study, as I said, is complete. It's currently, right now, being reviewed by the Public Service Department. That's a requirement of the grant. And once they approve our feasibility study, we'll be able to move forward with the development of our business plan. You may also be interested to know that in June, we are planning to host a webinar to share the details of that study with the wider community. So keep your eyes open for that. In the meantime, as we were developing this feasibility study, the Deerfield Valley Communications Union District came together, and you're going to hear some more about them later, but from them, they will become the CUD for the Windham region. They currently have 9 member communities and are looking for others to join as
David is
able.
saying 10.
10. I thought I said 10. Sorry, that's what I've written down. Yeah, and we've been working closely together. Our feasibility study and business plan will become theirs, and we've been participating on each other's team calls and efforts as we've been able to. I was, let's see, going to talk a little bit about the CUD consortium, but I think that June talked about that a little bit, that the there may be a CUD consortium developing in order to access some funding that we might not be eligible for or competitive for otherwise. And so we'll see, you know, how that goes. There is an example from the Midwest where multiple communities and organizations came together and were successful with this Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, and our CUDs are looking at that currently. Our business plan is underway, as I mentioned. That's our next step, and we're hoping that it's going to be ready by midsummer at the latest, and we think that will be good timing with the potential funding opportunities that are on the horizon. And I think that's what I have for now. If anybody has any questions, let me
Great,
know.
thank you so much, Sue. Jessica, it looks like you have your hand raised. Did you have a question for Sue? Go ahead and unmute your.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, I'm sitting in a car looking like a lunatic as usual. I was just going to say that I wanted to just say to you guys that I think the whole idea is that when you're doing the surveys, I don't know how much is being spent on all the weighing and the surveying. You know, everybody's doing it everywhere, and I think it's a great thing. But when it comes to these type of things, it really has to be more of a feel from the ground up and from the people that know the most about that technology and what it can do for an area. Now, if these people understood what it is, it's not a question of if they should do it. It's a question of why are they so behind? Because you're not going to start making the money that you need and saving the money that you need to save unless you have the internet in the best way you can possibly get it. So the idea is not to just keep throwing funding around, but to put it on the right places. Now, it might not have been the way it was in the past, but it is the way it is now. And you've seen that just with the coronavirus. You're doing everything online. So the internet has made it possible for all of us, especially a state like Vermont, who needs to save money. Not just put out money and try to think of different ways. And we're all spending all this money trying to figure out why and what. But there's no science to it. The people that we're weighing and surveying don't know about it. They haven't been informed. They don't understand what it can do for them. And that's why they're not all voting for it. Or else it would be an obligation. That's the point. So I agree with everyone. I think Laura's done incredible work with this. You're fighting against, you know, maybe not ignorance in a negative way, but just in a demographic where you're not hearing much about it and you don't know much about what it can do. So it sounds like a pipe dream and maybe this and that. It's not a maybe. You can save all the money on brick and mortar stores, restaurants, everything you want, any one of you, and just make money through shipping and this and that. You don't have to waste all the money anymore. So I'm just saying you need the internet in order to, that's where the wave has already gone. You're not deciding. It was already decided years ago. But we want to make sure to get in there before they start charging for the internet, like stuff that we wouldn't normally be charged for now. You're not going to be able to get on the internet in some time without paying a certain amount of money. It's going to go there too, because you know they're going to want to make money out of it. So the idea is we all want to make money for the towns. We need money. We're starving for money. The only way to do it is by utilizing the internet and saving money on the stores that we can close down and do shipping. Sometimes you could make more in shipping. There are some billionaires that you never even see because they're doing shipping. Anyway, that's my point. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Great,
good,
thanks,
good,
Jessica.
thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And we have Paul from
I think,
Montpelier.
did Phil want to say something?
Phil, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question, Sue. In reading the feasibility report, there were some numbers that I couldn't quite get my arms around. I'm doing it from memory. The report mentioned that there were 33,000 pass-bys. And the report said that project would be feasible with 15,000 pass-bys. And so if you do 30% of 33,000, you come up with about 10,000 pass-bys. So I don't understand, it seems like a disconnect that I can't understand between 30% of 33,000 and the 15,000 number. Can you explain that?
I don't know that detail off the top of my head. I need to talk to our technical service providers and look at that in a little more detail. But Phil, thanks for raising that, and we'll be sure to address it. Well, we'll get back to you on that, and of course, address it on our upcoming webinar.
Great, thank you so much. We have a surprise guest, Paul, who is a lawyer up in Montpelier, who has been pretty instrumental in some of the CUD creations. Paul, can you go ahead and unmute yourself? Hold on, let's see if I can do it. There you go, you should be, you're good.
Can you hear me now?
Sure can.
Oh, wonderful. And I didn't have to touch anything or break anything, right? Hi, Paul Giuliani. I'm calling from Montpelier, and it's been a really interesting discussion. I just wanted to add a couple observations to what Laura's remarks. One, you talk about this consortium. That idea has been burbling along for a while now, and I'm happy to report that there is a draft interlocal contract that hopefully all the CUDs in Vermont will sign into. The East Central Vermont folks asked me to draft it, which I've done, and they're going to just look at it, make some correct typos and that sort of thing. And hopefully within a few days, that'll get out for the CUD folks to take a look at. The goal is, again, picking up on what Laura said, the CUDs are the heart of this whole discussion. And the feeling is certainly, and I think it's demonstrable, that there is strength in numbers. So, I mean, if everybody can be rowing in the same direction, using the same vehicle and not reinventing wheels, I think we're going to get this thing moving a lot quicker. Now, just from a historical perspective, when EC Fiber started, the concept stage, which is probably close to 10 years ago, we had a blank piece of paper and an incredibly committed group of individuals, the study committee that put it together. And the result ultimately was the first communications union district. And the economic environment was entirely different in those days when EC Fiber, ValleyNet, decided to build out the system. And it had nothing to do with the COVID-19 or anything like that. EC Fiber searched for financing because this is an expensive proposition. And after a few false starts, it was apparent we were not going to get any financial assistance from either the state or the feds. We went down a couple of roads that ended up as dead ends. The USDA let us down at the end. Make a long story short, the CUD board, the East Central Vermont board, said, to hell with it, we're going to do it on our own, and they did. And there's been at least three successful bond issues that have brought this thing up to, 21, 22 towns right now. So the point I want to make is that the availability of funding, of financing of these telecom systems and telecommunications plants is a lot different today than it was way back when. Now, I'm not qualified to advise anyone on the eligibility rules and the conditions and the terms of the financing. But the point that bears repeating is that there are sources of financing out there, grants, loans, Lord knows what else, maybe some equity financing that should, and I say should, I'm not making a promise here, that should make it easier to finance the construction of these plants. So we'll see. And when I say you don't reinvent the wheel, and I always point to ECF because the governance and the operational factors, I think, bear repeating and repeating anywhere because they work. But the financing piece is going to be different for these new CUDs, some of which are it was alluded to earlier, are embryonic, and some have, progressed towards the point of maturity, but there's enough potential financing out there. I think that we're not going to have the problems that we had ECF at the beginning, because we were just, it was a real shoestring operation, but it did pan out. The other point was that, I mentioned this consortium notion. I forget where it started, but the folks at ECF, FX-Fin and the executive committee are very, very interested in getting involved with the newer CUDs, because the experience that ECF went through can certainly be shared elsewhere in the state of Vermont among the CUDs. And I guess the final point is that, we're all, as I say, rowing in the same direction here. The experience to date of communication union districts in Vermont, I think, has been extremely positive. And unless and until these CUDs thrive and prosper, again, picking up on what Laura said, we're going to have internet deficiency in this state, broadband deficiency, and the only entities that I can see that I can deliver, it's not the state, it's not the feds, it's the grassroots CUD organizations. And I just applaud everyone's efforts, in picking this up and running with it, and the catalyst being the funding that appears to be available out of Congress. And let's just hope that they don't make it so difficult or attach so many strings and conditions that the economic benefit becomes illusory. I really want this thing to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Paul, I have a question from Rob Fish. He says, the challenge facing most of the CUDs is that the VITA broadband expansion loan requires at least a 10% match. What do you suggest for the new CUDs without any assets or large investors like EC Fiber had?
Well, what EC Fiber did, it wasn't a match. EC Fiber had to raise some capital early on, and EC Fiber created a subsidiary limited liability corporation company and raised money by private subscription. It sold notes to individual investors, raised a considerable sum of money. And when the system got up and running, those notes were paid off 100 cents on the dollar with plus interest. So I understand the equity piece. Whether grant dollars could be used to make that match, I have no idea. But again, the only experience I have was with ECF, where an equity contribution had to be made very, very early on. So the decision was made just to do family and friends subscriptions, and we raised a fair amount of money.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Just to be mindful of our time, Jessica, I do see your hand is raised, but I want to get to our regional CUDs here, and then I will leave questions just for the end. So if you don't mind just holding on for that. Thank you so much, Paul. I'm really glad to see you on here. And we're going to move on, I have the Southern Vermont CUD. So Tim and Jonathan, I've asked both of the CUDs to just touch on more or less what the role of a CUD is in their region, talk a little bit about how they figure it out, how they understand the need of the region they're covering, as well as just what does the next steps look like. So Tim and Jonathan.
Shall I go first?
Go for it.
Okay. Well, Southern Vermont is one of the embryonic CUDs that Paul just referred to. We started in November. At a meeting in November was the first time anybody had thought seriously about it. But because we were able to put together a committed group of people in a short order, we were able to put together a 12-town CUD in time for the March ballot, get it all passed and get up and going. Where we are since then is where we applied for the BIG grant, and were awarded that a couple of weeks ago, and are looking to start work on our feasibility study in the same manner that Sue was describing. Hope to start that very soon. We are, as we get into this, we're realizing that building capacity is a big part of what the CUD job is, getting together the people that can do the work that it's going to take to raise money or apply for grants or whatever that is. We were lucky in that we were able to get the Shaftesbury Select Board to come up with a little bit of funds for to hire the local planning commission, BCRC, to help us with some stuff. Jonathan Cooper has been helping with that. The planning commission, of course, would help in any way they could, and had offered to help in any way they could, even before we found that little bit of money. But it makes me feel less guilty when I email Jonathan on the weekend, knowing that we are paying him at least a little bit. Jonathan did a lion's share of the work in leading BCRC to apply for a capacity building grant through rural RBDG, Rural Business Development Grant. We're hoping to hear from that soon. That will allow BCRC to help us more and more with that. What I'm finding is that as we are coming together and getting known for the work that we're doing and trying to do, that people are coming out of the woodworks to offer to help, which is a really encouraging development. Michael Corey, who's on this call, has been in contact with me since we came together and has been offering to help, and is now coming on board as one of our alternate reps. Several other people have written to me recently saying that they'd like to help. What I'm finding in terms of, identifying the need in the town, we really are relying a lot on the department to have that data on hand. What we're finding is kind of in the same realm, is that especially with the lockdown, people are contacting us saying, can you get me internet tomorrow? I really need it today. That's happening a lot. Again, the issues that we're facing have largely been identified, and the big one is, of course, financing. There is money out there. All of it, just about all of it that I've looked at so far, it wants you to have some money before it gives you money. So we're seriously considering some of the steps that EC Fiber took in their early days, which is to fundraising, maybe selling early subscriptions, holding a bake sale, whatever it's going to take. But it's a real challenge to come together as a municipality with no ability to raise funds off the bat. So we are up and running, have gotten there very quickly, and are looking forward to getting the feasibility study done, trying to build capacity, and looking at what grant funds are available. And also, as has been mentioned, we're a part of the discussions with other CUDs to see how we can come together to leverage what talents and clout and wherewithal we have to go after some of these other funds.
Great, thank you. Jonathan, do you have anything to add?
briefly, something that I wanted to sort of talk about. It has to do with some remarks that we saw, or an article we saw today published in the Vermont Digger, VT Digger, about real estate sales and some increased activity with real estate sales. The article begins in Brattleboro and Mount Snow, talking about that, Southern Vermont is part of this, seeing a bit of a spike in sales, some interest from people who live primarily out of state. I wanted to sort of overlay that with something that came up at another Southern Vermont Economy Project's initiative a couple of years ago, a housing summit. Is at that housing summit that Paul Carocchio of TPW Real Estate gave an interesting presentation where he said about 50% of all the potential sales fall apart at that sort of home inspection stage. And a big part of that reason had to do with internet connectivity and the capacity for service to be extended. Marvelous mountaintop views, streams, brooks, all the things you want, but yeah, you're gonna have to pony up $14,000 and wait 6 months to get an internet connection out there. And so this has really been a way that we've seen in talking about the need, that we know that we have on the one hand, we have a population decline. We have a region that's in need of more people to fill the roles that our business community has to take advantage of opportunities. And we see an important asset in closing the deal is not as fully fleshed out as we'd like it to be. And that's something that, we know even now that has implications and is a bit of a barrier on our regional community development, economic growth. And this is something that we feel is, in some ways, allows us to bring that sort of statutory equity to all of our rural reaches, that we aren't just focusing on high value downtown, et cetera, or prosperous municipalities or small enclaves. This is something that gets into the hollows, it gets into the valleys, it gets onto the far side of the mountains. And so we feel really good about meeting a public need. So it feels good. I'm sure Susan feels the same way, as a regional planning commission, to be a part of this. And it allows us to address something that we've been hearing about for years, and not just in connectivity breakfasts or connectivity summits, but in other facets of life, housing development, et cetera. We've had a lot of excellent conversations. I know we'll hear from the Deerfield Valley CUD in just a minute. We were really grateful for their willingness to include us in conversations, for EC Fiber and ValleyNet to have been so accommodating, and obviously having Mr. Giuliani on the call today sort of is more evidence of that, so that we can all learn from each other's past experiences and find ways to really get that regional advantage that comes from sort of sharing resources wherever we can. So thank you, Sarah.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for being here and providing us some updates. Next, we're going to hear from the Deerfield Valley CUD. We have Ann and we had David. So Ann, if you want to maybe just start off, and then David, you can jump in or add anything at the end there.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Just a little tiny bit of history about how we sort of got started. It happened as a result of a joint select board meeting, probably early November, between the Wilmington Select Board and the Whitingham Select Board. Our two towns had a history of joining together on some really important stuff. We consolidated our two schools years and years before Act 46 came along. And so out of that joint meeting came a working group around the issue of broadband, which was one of the main topics that was discussed at that joint select board meeting. And we created a working group to go forward. And we met every other week in person, believe it or not, we used to do that, at the Jacksonville Municipal Center. And we had 25 or 30, and a couple times probably even more than that, people joining us. And it became apparent that a number of towns had town-based groups looking at the broadband issue, some for a very long time. But they ran into the issue of funding and economy of scale. And so it really didn't become very possible to do very much at all, except a little bit more sophisticated lobbying. And as that went on, then the issue of forming CUDs became part of the conversation. And so 5 of the towns that had been participating in the working group had articles on our town warnings, and all 5 of them passed. And so we had an initial 5 towns: Wilmington, Whitingham, Halifax, Marlborough, and Stratton were our founding 5 towns, which have now grown to 10, which we discussed a moment ago. So we're now on the cusp of some a growth pattern, or a way of thinking about this that is considerably larger than our small area, even though our small area that fomented the beginnings of this are some of the most needy areas, even in the whole state, in terms of the access to broadband connectivity. So we're really pleased to be involved in a whole lot of all of this going forward, much of which Tim and Jonathan just spoke about. And I'll let David talk a little bit about the actual work we've been doing since we were formed. And it's been really very interesting to follow all of that as we get ready to perhaps go on to the next step, which is a consortium of all the CUDs around some much larger funding opportunities. David?
Okay, thank you, Ann. The first thing I'd like to do is express some thank yous. We got ourselves started, as Ann said, at March town meeting. But before we started, first there was a meeting organized by Laura Sevilla and others in our delegation in September of 2019, which brought a lot of people together, which then subsequently coalesced in the working group led by Ann. So and the group came together in September so that they could learn about the recent legislation that was passed that helped make it possible for that encouraged CUDs to form. And so, of course, a lot of us have. We are thankful for the Windham Regional Commission and its study partners because they picked up the ball with the Broadband Innovation Grant and got the ball rolling before we were formed. And so we're very grateful for that. We're very grateful for Paul Giuliani, who's not sitting at his desk right now, but he has given us some free advice to help us get started, which was very much appreciated. And we are super interested to hear more about the consortium that is being developed by EC Fiber. Strength in numbers, I think, is going to be our way forward. So what have we done? I've probably left some people out, but including our volunteers. We, like Southern Vermont, we've got a group of volunteers, we're all volunteer run. And you know, they are our strength. So the work that we've been doing in parallel with the planning done by the Windham Regional Commission team is to interview vendors. We wanted our governing board to become aware of the marketplace for vendors and what those vendors could offer. We're mindful that EC Fiber is a municipal body like us, but they have no employees and they do no work. The people who, or the people who do the work are ValleyNet, which is the nonprofit group that supports EC Fiber. There's a contractual relationship between the two. Now, whether we can hire a nonprofit like ValleyNet or a for-profit firm, of which there are several that could possibly perform the same work, that's to be determined. So our first order of business for our board was to become educated about the marketplace. We have a few more of those presentations scheduled, and I think that's been very helpful. And then the next thing we have to figure out is funding. It's been alluded to by Tim and others. And Paul. there are funding sources available out there, certainly more than were available to EC Fiber when they began. But how we best coordinate them and how we come up with the matching funds are topics that we'll be focusing on, because before you know it, the Windham Regional team is going to have a business plan, and we are going to be in a position to start executing. And so where we get the money and who we might engage to do that are the topics top in mind right now.
Great, thank you so much. Let me just pull up the participant list here. Do we have any questions for either of the CUD representatives? Jessica, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'll make it more concise. I just want to mention, I think everything you guys said was beautiful and you have the whole thing covered. But I think you also have to consider the amount of money you're going to have that you're going to be saving, because you're going to be, a lot of the people are going to be utilizing their, the internet for their home businesses and everything else. They may never, that's not something that's going to be a maybe. So when they see that and the amount of money you're going to be saving and all the brick and mortar, the storefronts, this, that, and the other thing, people don't really need now anymore. And people who may think they need a degree for this and a degree for that, they're also not realizing. So those people are going to come into the market. A lot of things are going to change. So that money right there, even if you didn't want to come up with any money at all, and then everybody just made a commitment to, factor in those things and take away, the brick and mortar things you don't need and this, that, and the other thing. Anything that can become digital, through shipping or this, that, and the other thing, you're not going to need that anymore. Nobody has that type of, foot traffic anymore, unless you're, in Manhattan. But even then, nobody's getting people to come in like that. But the levels that you can reach globally, you're in a whole nother ballgame, like the gentleman said. It's changing. The market has changed. It keeps evolving, and this is where it's evolving. We're not going to need that anymore. So therefore, the budget is going to change, and you're going to have, how much money do you need total to do the whole to-do that you were saying? I'm just curious.
Jessica, was that a question for?
Yeah, I can take
anybody
that.
here, like you guys were saying that we're going to start with funding. I'm sorry, I don't remember like my own name.
I can take that. This is David. EC Fiber, for its member towns, has raised over $40 million to finance their network. And my best recollection of the Windham Regional plan is that we would have to spend at least $30 million to get all of the underserved areas of our Windham region towns. So there's a considerable amount of money that needs to be found and invested. The good news that we have that EC Fiber didn't have is that they didn't have any initial sources of funding, whereas we do. We have such sources as potentially the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, a federal program, the Northern Borders Regional Commission, which is a federal and state program, the Vermont Economic Development Authority, which is a state program. So, and it's putting together those sources of money to be then followed by the same type of municipal bond issuance that EC Fiber used. That's how we expect to raise the funds to build out the infrastructure.
Which are all great. I'm just saying that you're also going to be saving a lot of money once you have internet, and because the market is global, the numbers are much bigger. The intake of money will change, which is what everybody needs here. Right?
Yes, that's right. I think we all know that if we create this infrastructure, it's going to have a dramatic impact on the region, because it enables economic development that otherwise would not be possible.
Yes, exactly. And it's an investment in the future of this area, and it will bring it beyond where it ever was in terms of success. Will help on a lot of levels, even socioeconomic levels. People that are depressed and things like that. A lot of that is over money, in the way they have to live. It's because we don't get enough funding here, as everybody knows. That we get, that shouldn't be a lot of money for based upon the numbers that we're looking at now because of the new market. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know it's a lot, sounds like, but maybe we'd be able to, I mean, there's other maybe venues that we could take, but you're covering all these main things and you're getting all the funding. But I'm just saying, not to not factor in that, you know, about how we're going to be saving money. So that'll be money gone towards it, you know?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
A great point. So unless there are any other questions, I just want to, one, thank everyone for making time to be here, learn a little bit more about, you know, what's been going on, and thank you to our presenters for doing the hard work. I do just want to note the program I run is hosting a 4-part development project development series, and you'll see on the screen we have those 4 workshops, 2 coming up in June, 1 in September, and probably 1 in the winter. And so, you know, please let me know if you're interested. You can find all that information on our website. And again, this is being recorded, and you can find the recording of this at brattleborodevelopment.com/SVEP. So thank you, everyone. Get out and enjoy the sunshine, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.